Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is S.C. Coleman, author. Uh, Today I've got a cold, so you have to bear with me. So in this video, what I plan on doing a future video where I talk about what ICANN actually is. It's so-called governance structure, what its real purposes are. And I did some of that in the last video. But in this video, I want to talk more about what current or close to current activities of that institution are. Or at least activities being done in the name of that institution. As with most of this stuff, it's usually, in some respects, smoke and mirrors. This is a memorandum of understanding between the EDP, that's Echo Delta Papa, University of Puerto Rico. Registered business address at 560 Avenue Ponce de Leon, San Juan, Puerto Rico. That'd be Avenida, but Avenue is what we say in English. Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, a public benefit nonprofit corporation registered under the laws of the state of California, USA. Having its registered and head office located at 12025 Waterfront Drive, Suite 300, Los Angeles, California. EDP University is a private nonprofit institution of higher education with a strong emphasis on technology and design. EDP University has 4 additional branch campuses in Manatí, Humacao, Villalba, and Caguas. EDP University offers a variety of graduate and undergraduate programs in fields such as business administration, criminal justice, and information systems. So it's sort of like a hunting ground for employees. ICANN has 5 regional offices located in Los Angeles, headquarters, Brussels, Istanbul, Montevideo, and Singapore. So this is your internationalist control structure, leveraging a imposed mechanism over the internet. Some of the things that we should understand is that the internet is not inherently a bad thing and is not inherently controllable. The radio frequency spectrum is sort of like the air or the ocean. It's everywhere, all around us, all the time, and can be leveraged by anyone if they know how. What these things appear to be doing is establishing an arbitrary control mechanism or a matrix over the internet, so-called. Neither party is under the obligation to share its own confidential information if it deems that sharing such information would be contradictory to its institutional or business interests or its rights. I think we all know I got clauses there. Scope of cooperation: jointly promote and engage in the community in relation to the ICANN newcomer programs. So like I said, talent hunting, such as promoting the ICANN Fellowship Program and the Next Gen at ICANN program to the local community to drive participation and engagement in these programs where applicable. Jointly promote and develop a new training and capacity building event selected EDP University students and relevant stakeholders to raise awareness, I think we know what that means, and build capacity on topics where the missions of ICANN and EDP University intersect, including but not limited to internet security and stability. Each party agrees to take all necessary measures to maintain the confidentiality of information provided by the other party, including where it involves their representatives, employees, subcontractors, and more generally, their officers. It sounds like they're afraid of it being known who and exactly how many are involved in this, because it is in just about all aspects, especially today, treason. For the avoidance of doubt, no breach of an obligation contained in this MOU or performance or non-performance under this MOU shall give rise to any monetary liability by one party or another. And here's something I think is interesting. This references obligation contained in the MOU, and yet at the beginning of this one and pretty much all other documents of a similar nature, states it's a non-binding contract and things like that. And yet it has obligations and things, so it's obviously contradictory, hypocritical, but is still something that's to be understood because it provides the pretext for actual tangible operations. For EDP University, it says the attention of ENG Gladys Nieves Vasquez, President, EDP University of Puerto Rico Incorporated. Then for ICANN, you have Nayla Saras, Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement North America. And all of these papers are going to reference the same thing with a required copy to the Office of the General Counsel, which I expect is behind this and also is relative to the quote-unquote General Counsel of the Department of Defense. Possibly even the same people. It's hard to say. Either party may, by notice in writing to the other party, including email, designate additional representatives or substitute representatives for those designated in this article. Notwithstanding this determination, the provisions of this MOU shall survive to the extent necessary to permit an orderly settlement of accounts between the parties and bring ongoing activities to a proper close. That use of the word settlement I find very interesting. The responsibilities of the parties arising under this MOU are not assignable or transferable, except as set forth in this MOU. Pretty obvious why they would say that. Any attempt to transfer or assign such responsibilities, including by operation of law, shall be considered null and void unless there is prior written approval by both parties. All materials provided by one party, the disclosing party, to the other, the receiving party, shall remain property of the disclosing party unless otherwise agreed. The receiving party may use these materials with the prior written consent of the disclosing party. Any intellectual property, IP, arising out of any specific activities or projects will be governed under the terms and conditions of a separate and formal agreement to be executed between the parties, outlining each party's obligations thereto. To the next page. The last page. Interestingly, we have here Gladys Nieves, signed 8/23/2024, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Now, if you notice that date, it repeats 2024 because in the blank space it already lists 2024, and then it's also written by hand 2024, or allegedly by hand. Of course, this looks like photocopying, and we all know that signatures nowadays and dates and everything really doesn't matter that much. However, this next one's interesting because it's an anomaly. The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names, ICANN, is listed at 12025 Waterfront Drive, Suite 300, Los Angeles, California. Nayla Saras, Naela, that's November Alpha Echo Lima Alpha Saras, Sierra Alpha Romeo Alpha Sierra. That's listed as point of contact. However, it's signed by Sally Costerton, Senior Advisor to President and SVB Global Stakeholder Engagement and Interim President and CEO. We've seen this little game they played before with the Assistant Deputy Acting Secretary Garbage. Signed 27th of August 2024. London, United Kingdom. So next, we're going to look at a Memorandum of Understanding between the North American Network Operators Group, Inc., or NANOG, and the ICANN Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. I think that's interesting, that name ICANN. Not like, as in like I can do something, right? Or I can something. But there's two N's, so you would have I can N. Makes me wonder what the last N stands for in that type of context. The cooperation between the parties would further common objectives and strengthen the support for the multi-stakeholder participation in governance model of the Internet. The Internet, as we see it today, is not being governed by any, quote, government of what we're trained to believe or think of as a government. It is essentially being arbitrarily controlled through no other authoritative means or lawful means than it's declared so by private entities. The parties agree in their respective remits to continue their cooperative working relationship in connection with capacity building initiatives within the North American region in relation to the Internet's global unique identifier system. Any exchange of information concerning projects or programs of the parties shall be subject to the policies and procedures of the respective organizations. Within their respective remits, possible areas of cooperation between the parties hereunder may include the following but not limited to: conduct joint outreach and technical engagement efforts to be identified colleges and universities in the United States, like the thing we just read, on areas of mutual interest to the parties. And cybersecurity programs. I think there's other things that mentioned there, but I thought that the word cybersecurity programs should be important to highlight, and it appears from the wording and the location and everything, believe that that's probably the more important element, is the cybersecurity aspect, quote unquote, what they call cybersecurity. What one person thinks of as cybersecurity is not what they think of as cybersecurity. They don't care what the rest of us care about, which is avoiding wide-scale damage to the global internet user population, the clients or customers, if you will. What they care about in relation to security is the security of their control. That is paramount above all else. That's what they mean when they say cybersecurity. For NANOG, we have Edward McNair, Executive Director, 305 East Eisenhower Parkway, Suite 100, Ann Arbor, Michigan. For ICANN, Adil A. Aklobagan, Vice President, Technical Engagement, again with the required copy to the Office of the General Counsel, listing Los Angeles address. Either party may, by notice in writing to the other party, including email, designate additional representatives or substitute representatives for those designated in this article. Notwithstanding termination, the provisions of this MOU shall survive to the extent necessary to permit an orderly settlement of accounts between the parties and to bring ongoing activities to a proper close. Now that line and many others are repeated across these documents, meaning that they're probably fill in the blank copy and paste type of deal. Neither party shall disclose confidential information accessed or developed pursuant to this MOU, provided such information has been classified as confidential. Now, interestingly, it's signed NANOG, but no date is provided. And instead of the point of contact, once again, ICANN is signed by Goran Marby, 22nd of September 2021, listed location Los Angeles. Next document we have here is a very particularly interesting name on the title. Memorandum of Understanding between the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams Incorporated, or FIRST, and the Internet Corporation for Side Names and Numbers. The Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams Incorporated has an address at 2500 Regency Parkway, Cary, North Carolina. First was formed in 1990 with the purpose of enhancing global cyber incident response. Members are made up of trusted computer incident security teams from around the world. The cooperation between the parties will help the incident response community improve its understanding of the systems of the Internet's unique identifiers and will improve their efficiency and effectiveness in terms of preventing, detecting, containing, mitigating, and analyzing malicious activity of different kinds that leverages the domain name system or any of its resources. Of course, malicious, in the context of what they're talking about, does not mean malice towards the global internet user population, but rather malice towards their control of the internet itself. That's how the tricky wording works. You have to understand their perspective and what they believe to be malicious, not what you believe to be malicious or what somebody has told you is the definition of malicious, because they're working off of their perspective and you've got yours. And most people, when they read this stuff, they apply their own perspective to this documented paperwork, and therefore it doesn't stand out to them as being particularly important. The parties agree within their respective remits to continue their cooperative working relationship in the area of seeking a domain name system that is secure, stable, and resilient at a global and regional level. Collaborate in supporting, scope of cooperation. Collaborate in supporting and participating in activities aimed at reducing abuse of the domain name system. Of course, it doesn't really identify what an abuse is, but I think we all have an idea. This is the same context as getting a driver's license is not anymore to ensure that you're a competent driver to make sure that other people are safe on the roads. It's only an arbitrary adherence to do so because you were told to. And if you don't, then you can go to, quote unquote, go to jail or get fined or whatnot. That's the same idea here. And abuse of the domain name system has nothing to do with the user perspective of the internet, and completely has to do with the fact that what they're doing here is not an abuse in their perspective, but in most people's perspective would be considered an abuse. And of course, when we're reading this documentation, we know that when they're talking about abuse, really what they're talking about is what they consider to be an abuse. But they never define that properly. Well, maybe they do somewhere. Collaborate in supporting and participating in activities aimed at increasing risk awareness and prevention regarding the different forms of DNS abuse. Of course, they still don't say what that is. Collaborate, what examples or anything like that. Collaborate on creating or increasing capabilities among the incident response community and threat researchers with regards to abuse of or threats against the domain name system. And there you've got your line there. When some uniformed thug or somebody wearing an ID badge comes to your house, belligerent the situation and quote threatening, adverse responses or reactions, like you could have somebody who shows up at your door. Unlikely nowadays, of course, but more than likely just get a letter. And it's if you don't file this or do this or that, then all these adverse things are going to happen to you. If you walk into a building with a gun, or if you quote trespass, even though that word is used out of context, connotation, then you'll get fined and all this stuff. That's threatening adverse action. And then you tell that other person, if you try to do that, I'll put a bullet in your head because you're threatening me and I'm not going to allow that, etc. Then they would say, you're threatening me, and they would take that as an excuse to further escalate the situation. And that's sort of what's going on here. It's the same thing. It's don't you dare threaten us, because we'll do nasty stuff to you, so to speak. With the required copy to the Office of the General Counsel. And as mentioned before, that idea of threatening adverse reaction and then claiming that you're being threatened and that's an excuse to escalate the situation is two things. First, it's the quote unquote bully victim mentality, as people always call it, where a bully goes and harasses and beats someone up, and then claims the victim once they get caught. And at the same time, that shows the perspective that they are in fact treating you as an enemy. They, whether or not you want to accept it or not, they have declared you outright as an enemy, because that's not how you treat an ally or a friend. That is how you treat somebody who you see as adversarial. Now, interestingly enough, for First, now remember, First has an address in North Carolina. However, for the attention of Sergey Droz, chair of the board of directors. Now, the phone number for Sergey Droz is +41 country code. That's not +1 country code, which is the United States. That's +41, which is not in the United States, as far as the cell phone registration country code goes. And outside, Sergey Droz, President and CEO, Forum of Incident Response and Security Team. Like I said before, a corporation formed out of North Carolina. However, this is signed 15th of April 2020, Zurich, Switzerland. Also signed by Goran Marby, 7th May 2020, Los Angeles, California. This next document is a memorandum of understanding between the Global Cyber Alliance, GCA, and the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN. Now, the Global Cyber Alliance has an address of 31 Tech Valley Drive, East Greenbush, East Greenbush, New York. The GCA was formed in September 2015 by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Isn't that nice? More attorneys. More attorneys creating facades and pretexts for them to go around and acquire control under, embedded within that facade and pretext, and operating out of the name of some distant and distinct fictitious individual or figurehead. Once again, the GCA was formed in September 2015 by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, the City of London Police, and the Center for Internet Security to unite global communities. Wasn't that nice? They could just do that themselves. Implementing solutions to address systemic cyber risk and measuring the effect of those solutions. That is what you call a unelected, at least as far as the constitutional election goes, by the people, which we virtually have none of that. Even in the way that we think we do, is just a public theater, means nothing. Scope of cooperation. Collaborate in supporting and participating in activities aimed at reducing abuse of the domain name system. I think we saw those particular words used before. Now for ICANN, we have once again, with the required copy to the Office of General Counsel, listed here. And for GCA, we have a Mary B. Cavani, Chief Operating Officer. And then finally, for the signature, we have a Philip R. Ratinger, signed 20th of January 2020, Falls Church, Virginia. Also Goran Marby, 22nd of January 2020. The next document here is Memorandum of Understanding between the NASSCOM Center of Excellence for Internet of Things, NASSCOM Co. IoT, and of course, Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN. This front is, I believe, the first one I've seen with the actual date on it. Okay, well, maybe not an actual. Well, one has the year, but this one's dated 23rd of June 2018. NASSCOM Center of Excellence for Technology of Things, an initiative of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, METI, and NASSCOM. Head office located at 150 Diamond District, Old Hal Airport, Bengaluru. Now, it's got a different format to it than previous documents that we read. Mainly speaking, it's got this very attorney type, written type of learned document. What I mean by that is you find a lot of attorneys writing documents where it's got all these lines of bold whereas. And that's, of course, repeating out of connotation the use of the word whereas, to try to make it look like the simple use of the word whereas provides weight of authority. Whereas, the word whereas is just a pretext or a prepositional word that you put whereas, comma, right? Or something like that. It's not supposed to add any extensive weight. But they're doing the same thing here, where 3 times they have repeated the word considering in bold to add more sanctity or solemnity to the rather insignificant gobbledygook they're writing here. And of course, they also have the word convinced, affirming, and now therefore. Like I said, trying to make it sound more serious. Under scope of cooperation, we have technical cooperation and research. This is a big deal, especially considering you think about the call centers with a lot speaking with the Indian accent. Joint development of research projects and unique identifier technology. Cooperation and engagement efforts to raise awareness and promote partnerships across the wider India technical community vis-a-vis the joint research project. Community outreach and engagement activities. Collaborate to organize community outreach and engagement activities such as ICANN readouts, community discussions, and capacity development sessions. NASSCOM IoT will avail the use of its facilities for the above purposes. Facilitate the participation of NASSCOM's members in the above activities. Facilitate the participation of ICANN in appropriate fora organized by NASSCOM and its partners. There's a weird use of that word fora there. I've only ever heard the use of the word fora in the context of fauna and flora, so it's kind of odd. Parties will execute a separate detailed agreement which provides for finances, deliverables, roles and responsibilities, etc. for each party for each of the joint research projects they decide to collaborate on respectively. That sounds like a directive given to them rather than a quote agreement as they're pretending like this is. Most of this paper's like that. It's assigning things to these entities and it feels like the paper is being made by a middleman who is positioned above these entities and telling them what they're going to do essentially, but pretending like the entities get together and agree to this stuff. Now we have the use of the word programs in 2 ways. You have programs spelled the normal way with 1 M, and you have programs spelled with 2 M's and an ES, which is something you find a lot with United Nations related paperwork coming out of Europe. Each supplementary project agreement, memorandum of understanding, or exchange of letters shall be duly signed by the authorized representatives of other parties and should specify in detail each party's obligations. Any supplementary project agreements, memorandum of understanding, or letters of agreement entered into pursuant to this Article 4.2 shall be governed by the terms of this MOU unless the parties expressly provide otherwise in those instruments. For ICANN, we've got Samiran Gupta, head of India, with a required copy to the Office of General Counsel, and then the business address listed in Los Angeles. For NASSCOM IoT, we've got Sudhanshu Mittal, Plot 7 to 10, Sector 126, Noida. And then the signing is very interesting. You have Sudhanshu Mittal, Director Industry 4.0, 26th of June 2018. Bengaluru's Karnataka. However, for ICANN you have again Goran Marby. Except this time Goran Marby is signing 25th of June 2018, Panama City, Panama, rather than the use of the fictitious use of the address of Los Angeles. Alright, this last document we're going to look at is a memorandum of understanding between the GSM Association, GSMA, Internet Corporation for Sign Names and Numbers. Now, for those that don't know, GSM stands for, I don't remember which it stands for, but there's GSM and CDMA. The CDMA is the usual standard, it's like a signal switching mechanism used by, like Verizon, cell carriers. GSM is used by, I believe, if I'm not incorrect, it's used by like T-Mobile and some other ones. But I think they might switch back and forth. Either way, GSM is relative to cell phones. GSM and CDMA. The GSM Association, an association of mobile operators and related companies with its head office located at floor 2, the Walbrook Building, 25 Walbrook, London, United Kingdom. The GSMA represents the interests of mobile operators worldwide, uniting nearly 800 operators with more than 300 companies in the broader mobile ecosystem, including handset and device makers, software companies, equipment providers, and internet companies, as well as organizations in adjacent industry sectors. And of course, I wonder how what they're making sound all pretty there actually boils down to in a real world context about exactly how they quote unquote represent the interests of mobile operators worldwide. Because usually they use that word in a proprietary fashion. It's in like the interests of mobile operators worldwide are property of the GSMA or something like that. That's how they usually do that. Mobile networks have evolved to be the main underpinning infrastructure for internet services, especially in developing countries. Cooperation and collaboration between the parties would enable scalable connectivity and advance their shared aim to foster continued expansion of interoperable networks and the deployment of information and communication technology. Objectives and areas of cooperation. Engage in collaborative efforts to raise awareness about internet governance issues that are of common interest to both organizations and their communities. I think we know what that means. Work together in appropriate internet governance fora. There's that word again, fora. I don't know why they're using that word. It's very odd. It sticks out. To promote interest in policy issues related to both organizations' remits, such as an open and singular internet. So what they mean is an internet that everybody's forced to operate on, in which they control. Connect technical experts for each organization for information sharing and potential practical cooperation with internet-related technical and security issues. That means, of course, espionage, among other things, censorship, etc. Here's another second use of the word fora. Developing regional collaborative efforts to work in synergy to coordinate, promote, and provide content for regional events. A third use of the word fora. Possible members of ICANN's global stakeholder engagement team having a biennial meeting with GSMA staff to jointly compile a written update on progress under this MOU and related developments within the organization. A joint written assessment may be provided to the GSMA policy group and ICANN executive team at the conclusion of each 2-year period. 4 and 5, use of the word fora. So now we're up to 5 uses of that word fora. No statement contained herein is intended as a representation. So that's directly contradictory to the previous statement in which it said that GSMA represents a global interests of mobile operators worldwide, and yet it says no statement contained herein is intended as a representation. Isn't that interesting? Directly contradictory. For ICANN, it once again lists with the required copy to the Office of General Counsel. Now for GSMA, this is the first time I've seen this. It states a Belinda Exelby, head of international relations, to insert address. So not only is there no address, but you have a brackets to insert address, which means that I expect when I look at these documents, the original template has all this wording filled out in a standard format, possibly even using a computer program to generate it, and you just insert fill in the blank for everything else, making it very easy to proliferate this documentation with no actual required writing of the document. You simply just plug in the necessary stuff, which might be the reason that these documents often have contradictions in them and a bunch of other nonsense. However, the telephone number is +44 7824 592 769. Country code again is +44. And finally, interestingly, we have the signatures here without the printed name. 28/2. First of all, this is a really weird way to write a date. You have 28/2-18. What I believe that means is February 28th, 2018. Both signature lines on behalf of GSMA Association and ICANN have those same date formats. Under ICANN, it's listed out CEO, and on behalf of the GSMA, it's listed out OG or DG. It's hard to say, but I think it's OG. Both places are listed as Barcelona. That's certainly strange.